Kevin Grogan, we talked probably several years ago about the possibility for a show, and it looked like, it was, museums have to time compared to, say, a gallery. It takes a long time to get everything in line, and it was great to work with Kevin to be able to figure out what it was gonna take, and the show was actually postponed 3 months, thank goodness, because I did not have enough work done that I wanted to show, and also the amount of efforts I wanted to make to get people to know about the show coming up. And then Catherine Walls, who was instrumental, and she was back here years ago. I actually had a show here about 22 years ago, a solo show. It was even before Kevin was here. And I think she was here at the same time, Catherine was. And so it was good to see her and to be able to send her enough emails that she was probably tired of. She'll be glad I'm not sending things, because I wanted to get everything right, and she did too, and it really worked out well. And then we go down to Matt, who did a tremendous amount of work, and he's the one that makes this happen for me. I was able to contact him, and I sent the images, and they should be lined up just the way I'm going to kind of explain each piece. Nicole, I don't know if Nicole's here or not, but she showed Kevin a few of the pieces that I was sending her years ago, and she did a great job on there's Fine Arts Connoisseur magazine. I don't know if y'all are familiar with it or not, but they're running an ad, September-October issue for the Morris Museum, and it has one of the larger pieces in there, Somerville, which you'll see in the other room if you haven't already seen it. So I think that'll be, that was well done by her. And then Dwayne, I knew when I brought 30 pieces for the size space, it was going to be a challenge to make it work on installation. And I was pleased to see it when we came in the other day and looked at the work, and it looks great. I was just so happy everything's spaced out. That's a lot of work to be able to put together. Also, Sherry Scott, who really helped me kind of know who was coming and that information. There was a number of collectors trying to come from Charlotte. This was with a bad accident I just found, and it's backed up traffic. They said till 4 o'clock today. So a lot of these people are not going to be able to make it because of that. They were in traffic for 2 or 3 hours, and I don't think Arless is quite that important just to do that. So I don't blame them. I'm an idea guy, and as a whole, I like to think of imagery things in my imagination. I remember when our son Orlin was in grammar school, and I thought, what if the teacher asked him what I do for a living? And he would say, well, he cuts out paper and he finger paints. And that's what I do a little bit. I use this index for a lot. The teacher would probably say, well, what does your mom do? Well, she assists him. And, how do they make a living? Okay. And it challenges at times to do that, because fine arts is a tough way to make a living. I've been very fortunate to do it now since I started Watercolors in '81. I'll demonstrate my best paintbrush here. This is my index finger. I paint about 70 to 80% of the pieces you see out there are done with this index finger. If I do a sky like some of the larger pieces, then I've got my big brush, and I'll wave it across there. I'm working my hands a lot, and sometimes they get so, I want those colors still, but I want to add a color. I'll go to my left hand a little bit. I was left-handed till I was 5 years old. I had a mom that said, hey, I raised 3 kids that are right-handed, and we were all separated by like 6 years. And they said, you're going to be right-handed. So I was So I'd say art is a gift from God, and it's always given me, I'm not a patient person, but it gives me patience to do these pieces, because it really takes time to develop these pieces, to collage them. Collaging is the most time-consuming. The painting part is the more passionate part of doing the work. Kevin stole this whole page because I was talking about my dad and all. I'll do one thing. My dad won the National Hobby Contest in California. Walt Disney came by and spent over an hour looking at his miniatures. He's just in the, I believe the Ogden Museum has my dad's carvings, which was footballs, like 96 figures, size of a ping pong table. And he actually had that on top of the roof, driving all the way out to California, the actual board, and then all the figurative pieces. And it's set in a box for nearly 40 years because there was just no way to sell it. And so the Ogden Museum was a perfect fit with New Orleans and LSU there. All of my family, including my little sister here that came from Louisiana, we all make things. You know, my sisters are quilters, and Ginger does these nice little angels that she's done for years. And then when I got married, met Patsy, we all, you know, she falls in that same pattern. She's an artist and helps me a tremendous amount to do all the work I've done over the years. I was going to talk about my left-handed thing. I can make right-handed turns, but is my key, not left-handed turns. I'm a right-handed. I just have to kind of hold this side up because my imagination is just so much. You know, it's analytical to make a left-handed turn. I have to think it through. As a kid, even as young as 3rd or 4th grade, I wanted to be an illustrator. I wanted to be like Bernie Fuchs and Bob Peak and, you know, Alan Cobra. Those were just major illustrators. Sports Illustrated, Time magazine covers. Those were all, and I collected their work. Well, Alan Cobra and I became a little bit of a friendship in letters. And they started up the first time they ever did it was an illustrator's workshop in New York, and it was a month stay. And I got to study under them. Bob Peak did Camelot, poster that you'll see, My Fair Lady, Apocalypse Now. I mean, he was one of the major that did poster illustration that's ever lived. He's one of the top 5, I'm sure. And so we went to the studios, and one time we went to Bernie Fuchs' studio, and he said, let me go in the back, and he goes in the back, and he comes back, and he has about 20 or 30 unstretched canvases on his arms like this, and then he just drops them to the floor. And then we're going through them, it's, you know, Sports Illustrated, Times covers, you know, and it's like the amazing thing that hit me was the consistency, and it's always kind of stuck with me. You know, you labor over these things, you want each piece to be as good as it can possibly be. And he had done that in a major way. Bernie Fuchs was just a fantastic illustrator. And and when he dropped it, it was all these other students and me, we just, wow, you know, and then it hit and it made that little sound where the canvas just flopped down. And it was like, he loved what he does, and you got to keep those back in the days with illustration. Most of those I'm sure have been sold. And I'll tell you a quick story, and then I'll get on to the work, is, and Kevin touched on it, Joseph Raphael was just this incredible watercolorist. He's passed away. Sculptures with the reflections in. Now, I've added a lot of color to it than was naturally there. But that same day, there was water bubbles sitting on my black Camry. And I said, Patsy, I'm going to photograph this. We're getting ready to go to Biltmore. I said, well, just give me about 10 minutes. So I got up there and I started photographing the front of the car. It's black camera. And I had those bubbles, and then I had these reflections. And so I'm always trying to layer things just like I do in collage, but I'm layering them now on an iPad. Summer Villa was a piece I did a Summer Villa. It was a different name. It was 2006. And when I did the piece, it was probably about this large. It was on board, which is all my collages up until about maybe 2017 were all on board. They were never on canvas or on gesso board. And when I did it, I always wanted to know if I could use that same villa another way, and maybe a bigger piece. So what I did is I blew it up image-wise, started doing the layers, and you can see how the clouds kind of break in. Those are photographs of clouds I actually took at the beach and kind of placed them in there, and they kind of weave in the building. Then I found lilies. So the other one didn't have anything, it was very different. And so as I'm placing it in there, and I'm exaggerating these lilies at the bottom, as you can kind of tell, with the water pads, and then that little border around there, I needed something to make it kind of stand out, and that's sort of how that piece unfolded. Okay, I don't know if y'all been to Stove Botanical Garden outside Charlotte, Gastonia area. They decided to use about 12 of my pieces. This piece is only this big, and they blew it up and they placed them throughout the garden. And so it was kind of like an offshoot of what I guess Chihuly wouldn't believe me wasn't this major event. But it was kind of neat to see work that I'd done, very small in some cases. I mean, maybe one of the larger ones like this, but they blew them up pretty nice scale. And the stove did was try to match plant life that would work with my collages. So they all had these 10 or 11 pieces that they did that way. Were all chosen different gardeners there and got to choose how they wanted to make it work. Okay, Hotel India. This is the only figurative piece in here, and it was just kind of nice to sort of, and I've probably done about 60 figures over the years. Most of them are not real large. This one's like 20 by 16. And when I did it, I wanted him to have that balance on the boat, and then I started having, these are sections, if I can point to, let me right in here. Those are all cutouts of Matisse's, most all of those are. So I'll cut out I cut a lot, so I use these different sections from books and magazines of Cezanne and Gauguin. Those are artists, and Matisse, especially in this particular piece, they're kind of layered in there. You'd never know Matisse did it because I'm just using those pieces and go back and painting them. And then I'm using the reflections in there, and then I kind of created this kind of setting with the palm and then the hotel, it was just the figure and then just the boat. Everything else around it was things that I pulled together and created these environments, which all of them are. I usually build from one particular setting or maybe a couple settings. And some of these are hundreds and hundreds of pieces. Some are, you almost need to use tweezers to get them on there. They're very small. And then some are larger pieces and a lot of paint. I met the gentleman that has this, their daughters gave him this piece, rooster feathers. The rooster pieces, as a whole, I can be real painterly, just the feathers and everything like that. I've done about 9 of them over the years. And it was just something that I felt like, sometimes I really want to paint a lot. And I know the days I want to paint, and I know the days I just want to collage, because it's different patience. And when I don't know those days, there's a problem, because it's a little bit of a struggle, and so that piece, it just flowed. It was a nice piece to do. Okay, this is a piece that's really a collaboration of myself and Patsy, my wife. Who doesn't get to sign any of these things, but she does. She definitely helps in so many ways. Here she is. She's the extra pair of eyes that not all artists get. She sees the pieces fresh, because most of the time when she's seeing the works either towards the end or it's finished. And so she got a fresher look than I do. And usually she's right when she sees something that maybe just could be done a little different, or maybe proportions doesn't feel right. Occasionally she's wrong, and I'll spend 3 or 4 hours trying to correct that. And it's like, maybe it looked better the time before. But most of the time she's really right. And those extra pair of eyes, because she's a good design sense. On this piece, she's really good at spreading shells out, and we have little vases, and she'll have the shells in there. I thought, well, maybe there's a way to take those and use one of my another collage I had, and lay them on top there that have this kind of the seagrass that you kind of see in the green and the shells themselves. And so she placed them on there, and I started photographing them and placing them, in different little sections, and then building this piece. This particular, I've done, and the next piece, the next image you're going to see is in the show, and it's called Butterfly Cottage. I did a small cottage that had no, it was just a few trees in the background, pretty simple. I still have it at home. And when I did it, I said, maybe I can make it larger. And so then the one and I'll go back to this one. This is Butterfly Cottage. That's done from the same house that you saw the other one done from. They look totally different, but that is basically from it. And there was a third one offshoot, so there was actually 4 altogether, and it's completely different. It's a swimming pool in the front and fish swimming through it, and a totally different landscape around it. And this one's down in Florida. And so this is Umbrella in the City. and obviously all these are so much larger than when they were done. And there was an architect named Bertrand Goldberg, I'll just say Goldberg, and that was his most famous work, these Marina Towers, which is these right here. He only has two. I added one being built and three more, if you see an edge of this one. And it's almost like you're on a drone where you're kind of coming into the city. And I've kept this piece for years. It's one of those pieces that just, it's just so unique in the way it worked out. The umbrellas, I'm not sure what city they came from, but they're not from Chicago. And there's Los Angeles, I think there's a little bit of Hong Kong in there. There's probably about 10 or 12 cities. And to find, when you're doing perspective like that, to find elements that line up, but yet they're unique enough to work together. So I'm gonna have tons of files of things that don't work. It's amazing when they do. It's almost like a marriage of these two images against each other. Okay, this is City Skies. And on that I had the building and some of the buildings to work out. I wanted it to feel like you're looking through a window. And now when I used a little bit more brushwork in the sky, and then I thought when I was working on it, I knew it needed something. The flowers were a perfect fit. I've added some flowers to these and then sort of like a little ledge you're kind of looking through. So there's a sense of a window, but yet you see the window, but you don't. And then the border, it's a simpler border because there was a lot going on in that piece, and it's probably the largest as far as cityscape I've done. And that's I do a lot of them that are. Okay, this is now the permanent collection of the Morris Museum, and it's nice when you see good light. I don't have the kind of lighting you do now, so it was just nice to see it lit for the first time the right way. And I got into I guess it was maybe 2 or 3 years ago. I wanted to see how far I could take a rose. How many ways can I push a rose to be uniquely different? And I have it in my statements, and I can't memorize it for words, but Matisse said the first thing you have to do to be able to do is forget all the roses you've ever seen, because you've seen so many roses. You have to do something completely uniquely different. You have to forget about all the ones you see, and that's very hard. So I tried to do a rose where it's just it hadn't completely blossomed out, and you have these little offshoots from it. And then I wanted to have these kind of stream of color running through it. These are in 3 sections. You can see the line through those. These are actually the same. You can kind of tell flipped over, sort of the same image in the middle and more bolder. And then I use this is when I got my air pencil. So I started, always trying I have Q-tips I've used in paintings. Of the air pencil was an offshoot because I'm using iPads to make some of these images to blow them up. And it was kind of nice. You see a little drawing in it. That's actually from an Apple pencil, and I'm drawing with it. And then when you scale it up, it's just different. It's still not like drawing, like I feel like drawing with a pencil or a pastel or something, but it did give a nice flair to it. This was in the same time frame, and I'd had a photograph. I'd photographed a bunch of different things. There were actually reeds in the water. Believe it or not, that's what you're seeing behind it. And then I was into I thought, well, there's my Jackson Pollock area. I'm gonna throw paint on there, and see what I can do. So there's a lot of challenge in there because you don't know what's gonna happen next. It was so, and I don't mind something that you don't know the outcome on. It's one of the reasons I like collage compared to what I was doing in watercolors, is the fact you don't know the outcome until it starts developing. It's gonna give you a new direction. Each piece has its own challenge, and this one is I'm throwing the paint and trying to make it work and cutting out things to make I'm using green inks and all sort of acrylic inks in these pieces, and that was kind of a new thing for me to use when I did this one and the other one. And the scale-wise, it worked really good when we see both of those in this one is I wanted, when I was doing the roses, there's a combination of the type, the Japanese type on the side, and I had a friend of mine, he's here, Dave Yorbo, and I told him their son lived in Japan at the time, and I said, take a bunch of Japanese lanterns and see if I can use some of the type off of that, and that's where the type came from. And I superimposed it on there, and then there's references to Japanese print, there's still a lot of prints within the piece. If you look closer, these in a boat and a koi coming through it, you kind of see it at the left-hand side of your left hand, let's see, but on that side. And then I had another of these patterns that look like, and they're kind of bursting out. You can see them green at the top and a purple, and those, I sort of thought that would be kind of nice to, almost like they're bursting out of the rose, especially as it gets small over here. And it was it was one of those pieces I didn't know when I was ever going to finish it. I love the process so much. Sometimes I'm thinking, oh, I hate to finish this. It's not quite that bad. I did it 4:30, but I still add some colors to it. And there's a name for these little Japanese birds. I have it in my descriptions, the statements. And so I had those, and it was kind of nice to paint around those, and then using that, there was actually this blue is from another artist that I, sliced their work for. It isn't a well-known artist, and it just made a nice backdrop for it. And I think, and then once again, this little green on this side and some on the other side, you actually see a little bit of pearls. And I did a number of pieces where I superimposed pearls and water bubbles together, and just a little accent of it right there. And then this one has a lot of collage that sort of, almost like they're floating, there's this floating feeling to them. And this particular plant, this little yellow bloom thing that comes up, I'm trying to look it up, I have no idea what it is. But I use it actually in the wedding.